All right, in this section we're going to actually weld the belt with our Freestyle welder. Again, I'm using 3/8 orange 85. So, while yes, this is already cut and I could probably go ahead and weld, I'm going to just demonstrate a proper cut with these snips. One, I've been informed you can pinch your hand in these, so please be careful in how you hold it that you don't pinch your hand. Two, you want to lay that belt nice and perpendicular in the blade because you want a nice square cut. So you don't want to be twisted this way, you don't want to be twisted this way. You want a nice square cut. So as you can see, I got a nice square cut on there. It's just going to make your life easier for when you're welding. So here's our welder. A couple things to remember with this is this thumb screw, unlike our plug-in welder clamp, is this thumb screw controls the clamps on both sides. So you can turn either one of these and it moves those clamps open and shut. So we're going to start out with the clamps all the way out. The other difference with this versus the butt welding with the plug-in one is this blade starts off cold. It's not hot because we're going to put the material right up against the blade. These are the hold down clamps. These are the top hold down clamps. So what you do when you're starting off is you're going to put your material in right up against your blade. The nice thing about these is it's just a single knob to tighten that down, unlike the other one where we had two knobs that we were trying to play with to get it tightened down. Right there you can see I have the material right up against the blade. I'm going to take the other end of my belt and I'm going to do the same thing. So if you look, the belt are touching, both ends of the belt are touching the blade. Now, as I was showing you in the first module, we don't keep the batteries in it, so we're going to want to put the batteries in now. These do have a chart, or I should say a diagram on the battery direction. It's tough to see, but it's right there. It tells you which end of the battery to stick in. Once they're in, it has this little recessed rocker switch on here. We're going to flip that to on, and now you can see that there's a couple red LEDs in there that come on to show you that it's on and that you have power. That blade is now heating. So we're going to watch the blade. We're going to watch down next to the blade. We're going to watch the material. And as the material heats, it's going to start to peak up and roll over. And that's what we want. So because we're starting off cold, it takes a little bit of time.
And you're looking for what? I'm
looking for the belt to start to melt and bead up against the blade.
Now how tight have you got that thumb screw with that material?
Not tight. It's just touching because we don't want to squeeze out the melted material. We want that material to heat up but still be in contact with the blade. If we're closing these thumb screws real tight and squeezing that against the blade, all that material just squeezes right out, all the melted material. That's the stuff we need to actually weld it together. So if we squeeze it out and then we just have a cold center, we get a cold weld. So it'll be welded on the outside of the belt. As soon as you cut that flashing off, it's not welded anymore. So it's starting to bead up. So I'm just going to very slowly and lightly use this thumb knob to bring the belt in against the blade.
Is that a feel thing?
It is very much a feel thing. As you turn it, you can feel it kind of tighten up a little bit.
Different materials melt at different rates?
Absolutely. So the harder materials, when we get up into the polyesters and stuff, it takes a higher temperature and takes longer to start to melt, but I've noticed that it actually gets kind of, for lack of a better term, gooey. And it's like a thinner run, so then you have to be a little quicker screwing it in once it starts to melt. The softer the material, the quicker it melts generally. So we're starting to get a pretty good bead. So again, we don't want that bead to just kind of come up as a peak. We want it to start rolling back on itself. And that is what it's starting to do here. So I'm just going to back that screw off a tiny bit, pull the blade back out of the way, and then bring those belt ends together. Now, and I'm going to shut it off because you don't want to be putting your hand over that while that's still heating because you'll get burned. Ask me how I know. I did it myself the first time I used this. I pulled that back and I held it there. When I brought those weld ends together, I didn't bring them together tight till I felt it bind up on the screw. You want to just bring them together so they're just touching. You want that melted material to come in contact solidly with each other, but again, you don't want to squeeze it out. I used the analogy in the plug-in butt welding session about 2 cupcakes. If you want to stick 2 cupcakes together, you're going to stick them together by the icing. But if you push too hard, the icing squeezes out and you're cake to cake and it doesn't stick together. It's the same principle here. So again, a lot of this is based off of feel and subject to human error. So once everything's turned off and it's sitting in here, we want to let this sit for 3 minutes in the clamp to make sure it's cool enough. All right, we've now let this sit for 3 minutes in the clamp. We can go ahead and remove it. So to remove it, we need to loosen up the screws on the bottom. That gives us free play there, so it takes the pressure off of it. And we actually need to push down a little bit on the front on that slot. We need to do the same on this side. And now we can remove the belt. So it sat in the clamp for 3 minutes. This should then also sit for 27 more minutes unless you blow air at it or dunk it in cold water or something to cool it off quicker. But the idea is you want the weld to be cooled off all the way through, not just on the outside. So now what I'm doing is I'm snipping the flash off. You don't want that to interfere with the pulley groove and make noise or possibly jump it out of the pulley, so we got to get that off. We want to get that as smooth as possible. So, this weld, if properly done, is as strong as the rest of the belt. So you're going to get asked that by a customer. So again, key words, if properly welded, this weld is as strong as the rest of the belt. You're also going to get the guy that's going to come and grab it after you cut the flash off and you pass it out for show and tell. That's going to come and grab it and then squeeze it like that. And if it's not cool enough, it may start to split there. And then they're going to say, oh, we'll see, it's a bad weld. The weld stinks. Your response to that is typically, 1, it hasn't been cooling off for the allotted amount of time. 2, what is your pulley diameter on a 3/8 belt? We listed in our catalog, I believe it's about 3 inches. So that's like that. So is that belt ever going to see a diameter like that? Absolutely not. So that guy, being a smart aleck, is going to pull it out of there and do that. And you will see that because I see it almost every time. Question? Okay. So that's a nice proper weld. Now, this blade does need to be cleaned. There is polyurethane residue on the blade. The nice thing is with this tape on here that comes on the heater right out of the box, so you don't have to put it on initially, is a really good non-stick tape. So remember in the first module I said there's another use for your instructions. You can use the instructions to just scrape that off and it comes right off. And your tape is clean. Now, should you start having some tears or some pitting in that tape, it does come with extra tape, as I mentioned before. So here's your non-stick tape. So you would have to then apply that to the blade. But again, it comes out of the box, or the bag, I should say, with the tape already on, so you don't have to worry about it initially. It's only if it gets damaged.
And how many welds am I going to get from a fully charged set battery?
Depends on the belt size. So we liken it more to time frame. Those batteries will heat for an hour. So depending on depends how many belts you can get done in an hour. Bigger belts obviously take longer, so you can't really liken it to the number of belts, but you can go by time. So the nice thing is, I said before in the first module that charger charges in an hour, and you get an hour's worth of heating. we send you 2 sets of batteries. So you can be welding with one set while the other set's charging, and then when they run out, you just swap them out, you're good to go. Again, it's very important that when you're done, after you clean the blade, you take the batteries out. Any questions, sir?
No, I think I'm good.
All right. Well, that concludes the freestyle belt welding.